Welcome to a football show, Monday edition, NFL Draft Week edition, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. That is Paul Kuharsky of paulkuharsky.com. I am Braden Gall, and we are excited to be here because something's going to happen this week, Paul.
Finally.
There will be new players on the Titans roster that we will discuss. And today on the show, I thought before the draft, of course, we needed to do this, put it down on paper so that, or I guess on the internet, so that we can be held accountable for our picks and our predictions and our choices, but also how are we going to define success on this bad boy? Because there's lots of different ways to look at this. There's lots of different ways to define success for an NFL draft for a team, different expectations for everybody, different draft picks, different slots, different needs, all kinds of stuff. So how should we define success? And I think you can do that a number of different ways. You can also define failure pretty easily as well, but we'll get into that today. There's a group of players, and Nick Suss and I were talking about this on Thursday, and I wanted to go deeper on this. But I wanted to get this out there before Thursday and before our content later on this week. The Titans will be available to the press on Tuesday, tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So we'll have some reaction for you from that. But I wanted to look at some players that are just really good at football, and that occasionally the process, Paul, of getting to the draft, sometimes it doesn't necessarily benefit them, or they do poorly. And sometimes there's just guys that are just really good football players, and they slip through the cracks a little bit. Maybe they fall. Some are first rounders, some are third rounders, some are fifth rounders. And I just want to give you that list of names, guys that I just like, that I think are going to be better than you expect, because you know what? They were really good at football. And funny thing about good players, Paul, they're good at football.
Yes, so, I'm looking forward to hearing your list and reflecting on it. I know we've got some guys that we like overall, and some guys that we wouldn't necessarily want to see here. Then I always have to put the caveat on, like, no matter who winds up here, clean slate in terms of following them as Titans, giving them every chance to write their resume in the NFL. I wasn't a big Will Levis guy. I wasn't a huge anti-Will Levis guy, but he wouldn't have been a guy I would have selected if I was a Titans GM, and I'm nowhere near qualified being a Titans GM. But once he walked in the door, completely clean slate. And certainly because he's a delightful guy and a great quote, it was easy to go forward with him. But anybody they draft, once he's on the team, then you're all about seeing what he does in light blue.
Trevor, good to see you. Finally, some competent radio here on the internet, digital radio here to listen to. Look, great story, paulkuharsky.com. Make sure you check that out about metrics that the team uses relative to durability stats and sort of benchmarks they have for different positions. So we'll get into that a little bit as well. And maybe some final predictions. Thursday night's charity draft party to benefit the Our Kids Foundation. There are only a couple of tickets left. We have not really posted this outwardly much on the socials. We just sort of started this weekend. I wanted to give everybody listening a chance to get those tickets first. We are almost sold out on Thursday night. Again, limited size, limited room, very intimate experience. For those of you who have been before, you know all about it. Fantastic building right there. The Sinkers Beverages headquarters in Wedgwood, Houston, the Track 1 building right off 4th Avenue. Very accessible to the interstate, very accessible to all areas of town. It is a beautiful old building, big screen TV. We're going to be there, Stoney, myself, and JT, Hot Read, and a football show. We're going to go live when the Titans go on the clock, and then we're just going to party the rest of the night. So all you can eat Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. All you can drink Sinkers Beverages. They're going to have a specialty cocktail like they always do. We've had some giveaways in the past where we gave away some nice bottles of bourbon for those who get the top 10 picks correct. So we're going to have some fun. There's always something happening that we sort of don't anticipate. So come on. You can buy tickets. They're linked in the show notes on the podcast app of choice, and, of course, on the YouTube show notes as well. And then Saturday night, Paul Kuharsky, Steve Cavendish, Nick Suss of the Tennessean, myself, JT, Stoney, maybe a few other distinguished guests are going to be there in a private Q&A. Off the record, you can ask all these folks anything you want about the Tennessee Titans, or I guess anything else you want. And again, all you can eat Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, going to cater the event, and you'll get a 5-flight bourbon tasting as curated by Sinkers Beverages. Going to be a really fun weekend. And you should get like 5 or 6 or 7 new players for the Tennessee Titans, PK, to talk about. So,
well, 8 as of right now. So we'll see what they do in terms of maneuvering their way around. And I know a lot of people really would like to see them maneuver into more or higher, certainly.
Well, That's a great kickoff to how I would define some success, which is one particular way we define success. But I do want to go to your point about clean slating everybody, which goes to the GM, it goes to the coach, it goes to coordinators, it goes to players, and anybody new. Whether we like the draft pick or not, we are going to analyze, just like everybody should, fans included, should analyze these players to give an opportunity to succeed and then judge them based on what they accomplish. So with that being said, because I agree with you on Levis, I sort of felt like, man, lots of physical tools. He's a little undervalued by Tennessee Volunteers fans in this market for some strange reason because they hate Kentucky people. And that I didn't think he was worth the pick in the first round, and I was glad they didn't take him relative to ability and draft stock. But that when they got him where they did as an opportunity to throw a dart in the second round, I thought that's a fair risk. That's a solid risk. And my opinion of him hadn't really changed a lot, but I thought the value was better. And I went into giving him a full clear slate and opportunity to earn his way to the starting job and to prove himself. So with that being said about Cam Ward, I don't know if it matters, PK. I know it does in like the gotcha kind of, sports talk media world that we live in these days. I don't think it matters if you or I think that like the Titans should take him or not. Like it doesn't matter. Do I understand the risk behind taking Cam Ward and the reward behind taking Cam Ward? 100%. Absolutely. Am I excited to see what he could do in a Titans uniform as a potential savior of the franchise? Absolutely. Do I try to understand the probability of him becoming an elite player in the NFL? For sure, you need to do that too. You just sort of need to understand all the risk and reward. Who knows if he's supposed to be a great player or not? No, nobody knows.
I mean, find out. Find out is what the league is about at this stage. And so everybody comes in with great hope and expectation, no matter if your stock has dropped you around or no matter what the market dictates happens here. I mean, we all know that there's going to be somebody in the green room that stays overnight or leaves overnight that wasn't expected. What Milroe's doing in there. Yeah, maybe somebody's told them that he's going in the first round. That doesn't mean he is. But their storylines abound after speculation has abounded for months.
So I'm not going to ask you this question. You're welcome to chime in if you want to, PK, because Eddie's sort of asking this. Eddie's got a question about Levis, which is, does the league see Pickett as that much better than Levis? If we are trading him, only getting a fifth round seems rough to me. I think that's about what he would be worth if you traded him.
Straight up fifth round?
He's got more talent than Kenny Pickett, though, by a large margin.
The circumstances still, I don't think you're getting a fifth rounder straight up for Will Levis. I don't.
So you think Kenny Pickett's better in your opinion?
I don't think he's better. I think he somehow brought more in a draft trade. I think Will Levis has more on paper. Did Kenny Pickett play 2 seasons?
Probably less, probably about the same amount of starts, actually, if I checked here. If you want to chat for a second, I'll look it up.
Yeah, Kenny Pickett, also was drafted in the first round, about a dozen spots higher than Will Levis, which gives him a little bit more cachet. He also was traded to a team that was looking for a backup quarterback and that didn't have a great deal of need in the draft the way other teams might, and was seen as having upside.
24 starts for Kenny Pickett in 2 years for the team that drafted him. 21 starts for Will Levis in the first 2 years with the team that drafted him. Almost identical.
Maybe I'll be surprised. But I don't see Levis being traded. Maybe the Titans have a much better feeling about Allen than I do. I suspect they do have a much better feeling about Allen than I do. But there's got to be a market for Levis, and I'm not sure who exactly is loving Levis. Pittsburgh obviously has holes at quarterback. But, do they view him as better than Mason Rudolph? I doubt it, which is, look, we just went through that here. Outside of that, what's the market for Will Levis? Who's looking for a backup quarterback right now. I'm not sure. I haven't looked that closely, but I don't know that anybody's quarterback thirsty right now.
I think if you have a quarterback who's maybe injury prone and you have an offensive coach who really trusts his system and has been very good at developing these players, I think there's opportunity to take a guy who's got a lot of raw skills and put him into a system that's a little bit more stable and has more talent in it and isn't asked to do elite things. Then I think you can maybe build that guy. You can develop Levis maybe a little
but
bit.
But do the Rams, the Niners, the Vikings, the Packers, the Bucks have plans behind their guys? I'm not factoring in injury prone there. I'm factoring in a good coach with a good system that you could plug a guy into. And again, there you have Will Levis's brain working against him. Is he going to come in? Yeah. Can he learn the system? Yeah. Will he do what he's asked? Yeah. Is he going to have brain farts in the middle of that when he's called on? That's what you have to decide, because his history is that he will. And that's as a starter who knows your system inside out. If he's coming in a pinch where you need him not to make mistakes and merely execute the offense, let the run game and some easy passes and the defense give you a chance, well, he's got no history of doing that.
Yeah. Bo, good to see you and Eddie, by the way. Bo says Pickett was the backup last year in Philly. Yes.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. They're talking about the trade to Philly, not whatever happened to what was the trade to Cleveland was.
Oh, that must have been around the 5 round. I could not tell you right now. All right, so quick. So we're already kind of getting into final predictions here. Like, we do not expect Will Levis to get traded. I think that's a good prediction. The last one on that I would ask you, kind of out of schedule here on the show, which is there a surprise move coming with a rostered player, i.e. Jeffrey Simmons or somebody else? We saw AJ Brown get shipped in the first round of the draft. A different organization, but I'm just curious if you have any inkling as to keep an eye on, pick a name that's out of nowhere that might get moved because they can pick somebody else.
Well, I mean, Simmons is the guy, right? And there's logic to the side of the pro cons of trading Simmons. Get younger, get cheaper. By the time you get good again, he's going to be devalued and on the downside, all of that. But if you're straight up trading Simmons, and I had a source tell me he thinks he's worth a second or a third. So if you're straight up trading him for one pick, well, it might not be that pick that you use, but you're going to use one pick to replace him. So you're not gaining much there, right? And if you get a second or third for him, you're using a third or fourth to replace him. I don't think you're gaining that much. And I'm not a big Jeff Simmons guy. I don't know if most of you know that, but so I don't think it's worth it in that scenario. If you can get 2 picks for him, if you get a second and a fourth, I would do that probably. I mean, I think you can find good defensive linemen. They're probably not going to be as good as the best Jeff Simmons, but he's been getting hurt lately. He's a little less consistent. He's got
you do have Tavondre Sweat ready to go to develop into a bona fide replacement.
Yeah. And I think, many fans have come to me and said, it's easier to get a defensive lineman in the 4th than it is to get a wide receiver or to get an edge. And I agree with those assessments. Yep. I don't know that this regime is as fond of Jeffrey Simmons as John Robinson, who drafted him and had him at his, peak coming into the league, when he was, just great. Right. Or Rand Carthon, who, saw all these guys as his brother, or nephew. And so, there's an assessment to be made there of what Brinker / Borgonzi think of him, comparatively speaking. But then you need people who want him. And giving up 2 picks for a defensive tackle when, these other teams can also say, I can find a defensive tackle in the second with that second round pick who's on a first contract. And I can find, a defensive tackle in the 4th round who may not be Jeffrey Simmons, but can do some things. All these things apply to that other team as well.
Yeah. And so this sort of ends up I don't think you have to replace him. If you get I'm just going to use the 38th pick or something, right? I don't think you have to replace him there. To your point, I think you can get a defensive tackle that is a nice depth piece in the 4th round with pick 120, let's say. So if you get a pick in the top 40 and you can add a James Pierce or a Emeka Ibuka, both of them, then I could see the value in making that decision. You have to have a lot of faith in your projection of what Simmons will become or is going to be. And there's not really another player on the board that on the team that really would lure anybody into a conversation. So there you go. Jason says, do teams try to bury their player visits? Why would some top 100 have so few reported visits across the league? Some of those guys, Jason, are, and hope to see you this weekend, by the way. I know Jason's been out every year. Some of the players don't need the visits. Like no one's visiting certain players at the top of the board because
Travis Hunter's making 4 visits.
Right.
That's it. But yes, a lot of teams for a lot of time, the Titans more have gotten out this year than any year I can remember. But they're in a position with the first pick, maybe things have changed for them. I don't know, and that under Floyd Reese, they often said, well, a lot of these are to help us cross guys off the list. We're getting medical information or character information that helps us eliminate guys as much as it helps us establish guys. And I think there's something to be said for some of that happening. You get clean character guys who maybe don't visit you. So we'll see what percentage of their 8 picks or however many picks were out of the 30 visits. I think we know 26 or 28 of them. I did better than I've ever done at reporting 30 visits. But yeah, a lot of teams want to keep them quiet because they think they tip off intentions any information that's out there they consider bad. They want as little information out there about what they're doing as possible.
No question. All right, so that brings us to I want to do sort of wrap up the Cam Ward conversation along the lines of what we just talked about with Levis, along the lines of what we talked about with their decision-making and defining some success and making final prediction kind of all wrapped into one little conversation here about Cam specifically, which is the first and foremost way to define success for this team is if you draft Cam Ward and he's your starting quarterback for the next 10 years, everything else is moot at that point. You have solved the most important position on the field with the right resource, with the right player. And that is a huge success, unlike this team has ever seen, maybe, other than probably Steve McNair, I guess. And so that's an easy way to say, oh, we'll define success. Well, we're not going to know that for probably 2 or 3 seasons, even if he's pretty good in his first year. We're not going to know. And so ultimately, my final prediction on like what the Titans should or shouldn't do at number 1 with Cam Ward, I mean, right now I think we're at like a 97% chance they draft him. I mean, I'm even higher than we have been in the past. It doesn't mean that if somebody doesn't come along with an insane offer. To your point about Pittsburgh, Shedeur Sanders, I've seen him fall to Pittsburgh at 21. So if you want the best guy, you're going to have to come up and get him, and maybe someone gets desperate last minute and wants to go get him. I don't know, but they would have to offer a huge deal. Now, if you're asking me, like, what would be the best thing for the franchise moving forward, I still, like gun to my head, I still think trading back and adding a first rounder next year and 2 or 3 more picks this year is still better for the franchise long term and builds a more stable foundation moving forward. But I also totally understand the risk reward conversation that they're debating in their head and saying, Cam Ward is a shot here. We got to take a shot at this because he could be that good. And if he's that good, he's a very exciting player in college. And if you believe he's that good, you should not trade him for anything, as they have said. And so I don't think it's overly, I think the should they draft him, do you like the pick or not, is overblown a little bit. It's more about, do they believe in him? And if that's what they believe in, they can't pass him up. Even if I sort of believe that, 4 extra picks might make this team better for a longer period of time moving forward. Roster overhaul is how I would define the most successful draft for the team. That's not really possible with their current draft picks.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've had that conversation, to the nth degree. So I you covered it there. I'll go beyond that to successful draft. And I think, let's put the quarterback stuff aside. They're staying at 1, they're taking Ward. What's a successful draft beyond that? Well, Ward's going to be, he can make it a fantastical home run draft, or you can make it a largely a bust draft. But there are a lot of other players that are going to factor into this. So what can be good? They need to hit at 35 or make a trade from 35 that gets them a lower second and a third. They need a starting player at 35 who is of influence. We all expect that player to be an edge rusher or a wide receiver. That needs to be a day one starter who is contributing in the first month of the season right away, right? Impactful as a pass rusher or impactful as a weapon for Cam Ward or whoever's starting at quarterback on day one. Outside chance, what's the third position for that spot? I would say if somehow it is not a wide receiver or a edge rusher, it would be some kind of tight end that fell into their lap there. I don't see that, but I could see, maybe there's some kind of wild run on wide receivers and they see some kind of tight end there that they think could be as influential as a wide receiver for a young quarterback who would do it. If it's that guy, he's got to be a blocking guy who can also catch. I don't know who that would be in the 35 range. It would be some kind of wild slip.
Well, no, so I think this is a good conversation because I think, and some of this ties into three names I'm going to include. So now we're really cross-pollinating all the conversations.
That's fine.
Because the three of the names that I would write down for, man, these guys were just really good football players, and I'm not really sure why they're falling because they just were really good for more than 1 year in a tough level of competition, right? Like high level of competition, very good players, unsure why they are now behind somebody else at their position for whatever reason. So Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia, starter as a true freshman on the best defense of our generation for Georgia 3 years ago, back-to-back national champs, and an overall elite playmaker in general. He's now behind a guy for South Carolina who's very gifted, but in a very predictable combine type way. The guy who's 6'3", 220, runs a 4.4, gets moved up ahead of the guy who was making plays at three different positions for a professional defense for 3 years. So again, Malachi Starks is one of those names. Luther Burden is another one, just a very good football player. I know why people are concerned about whatever's going on. I don't necessarily agree with that. Will Johnson at Michigan, cornerback at Michigan. This is a guy who is largely considered the best corner in the draft, comparable to Travis Hunter. His measurables at the combine weren't great. He didn't run on his pro day, so we don't have some of the workout stuff. But if you watch the tape, you see a very good football player almost every single game he plays.
I mean, he's a terrific player. I can't see how he gets to 35. If he's at 35, you take him.
No, and I'm not even suggesting that those three make it there. Right. I think Burden could. I'm seeing Burden projected there a lot. But to your point, Colston Loveland at Michigan, another one of those names, and Tyler Warren at Penn State, the two tight ends you're talking about. In theory, that is sort of the type of player you're talking about at 35 or thereabouts in the draft, where you go, this guy he's at a position that doesn't necessarily get treated as premium. And so he kind of moves down draft boards because corners move up and quarterbacks move up and receivers move up and tackles move up and edge rushers move up. And these guys all kind of trickle down, and maybe the measurables weren't great. And so they didn't, they overlook some of the tape because they're a little too obsessed with this, or this metric or whatever it might be. I think if it's not receiver and it's not edge, it sort of has to be a guy who's one of the best players at his position in the draft. And I do think safety and tight end are players that start right away for this team. I don't think they're a position of need at all, but they are guys that make the team. They'll make the team better.
They are positions of need. They're just secondary positions of need.
Sure. Okay.
And to your point, this is why the draft works so favorably. If you're a team in the 20s, in the top third of the league, those guys fall to you. They are very good players, right. and you're thrilled to get them, and you're not hyper needy for something, and you're like, whoa, here's the second best cornerback in the draft, and he's fantastic, and who cares that he didn't run? Look at his film from Michigan. He's fantastic. We welcome this guy, and he's going to be a 3-contract guy for us who's going to be outstanding. Whoa, here's the second best tight end in the draft, and everybody was busy filling needs up there, and watch Loveland make plays for us that make everybody say, how did nobody take this guy in the top 12?
Exactly. And that there is a long list of those, not long, but there's about 10 to 15 of those guys every year in the draft. that were all conference performers, 2 or 3 year starters, all American caliber players. Maybe they're not playing positions of premium import to the draft and to the combine and all this other stuff, and they fall, and all of a sudden, there's starters in every round of the draft. And I got a list we'll get to here. If we use the Baker Mayfield line for Cam Ward and just say that he's successful, right? Like that, he's above Baker Mayfield, he's better than that, so that part's a success. I still think you need 2 starting players if you're defining success, and I know that's hard with only a 35th overall pick.
I'm going to go more than that. I'm going to go more than that. Even if they have what they have, to really call it a success, you have to find a bonus player. So out of your 2 fourths and your 2 fifths, that's 103, 120, 141, 167. You need to find another starter, a surprise starter. Jayon Brown, Jarvis Brownlee. Jarvis Brownlee wasn't intended to be a starter out of the bat, but somebody like that comes in at one of these positions of need and is your guy pretty clearly. Like in the first 2 weeks of camp, all of us on the sidelines looking at each other going like, they found somebody there. And this guy is a find who's going to be an immediate impact guy. I would say you either one of these 2 scenarios. Out of those 4 picks, a clear-cut day 1 impact player, or 2 of the 4 who are contributors right out of the gate, role players, situational package players, but are going to be on the field. If it's that 3rd running back, a guy that no doubt is going to get the ball in short yardage situations, not going to fumble, not going to make mistakes in pass protection, and is going to maximize his carries. And you're going to be like, they zipped up that position. There's no question there. Yep. And if Pollard went down, that guy could be the number 1 back. If it's an inside linebacker, and I quite frankly don't think they should be taking an inside linebacker, but if they take an inside linebacker with one of those 4 picks, and he's one of the 2 guys I'm talking about, you say, hey, that guy is going to start next to Cody. And you're set there. And SOL for Cedric Gray and James Williams and Otis Reese, they're right back where they were. They got to make their bones on special teams. One of them's not making the roster.
So I think linebacker is an interesting one because you can find starters much easier at that position. Same with safety and running back. Those are 3 that you can find very easily. And I think what's interesting, I'd like to see what your reaction to this is, because this is not part of the conversation, but I've just been thinking about this, is that I am curious, and I think it is worth asking how committed this coaching staff is and front office to Cedric Gray.
I don't think they're very committed. I would just say this. In the numbers game, you got 3 guys on your roster. One of them should be able to be a 2-down player for you instead of you burning one of these picks when you have so many roster needs. Yeah. And here's the other thing. And I mentioned this in my own podcast last week and led my write-up about it with it. I think Titans fandom, and this is a good time to start to tamp it down. You say, well, 8 picks, 9 needs. We're going to solve the 8 of the 9 needs. You're not. No. The 250, you've got 3, maybe 4 potential contributors, but you're not getting starters in the 5th. This is Rand Carthon over-advertised this last year. He said, we're going to have 5th rounders who are going to come in and be, well, Jarvis Brownlee that was great. But most of the time, these are developmental special team guys who maybe are playing after a couple of injuries, and you're hoping they're good enough. They are not coming in, generally speaking. You might find one in a draft. That's what I'm saying. A successful draft could have one. But you're not finding 2 fourths and 2 fifths who are coming in and making you say that needs off the board. Hey, we don't have to worry about that next year anymore because we found a second edge in the 5th round.
So
that's miracle talk.
Kevin Byard, by the way, was the 64th overall pick, just in case people forgot. That's a very early 3rd round pick. So a lot of times we say, oh, you can find the Kevin Byards in the 3rd round, not near 103, which is the beginning of the 4th round. You can get him in the 60s maybe. But here's some examples of what you're talking about. So Jayon Brown was picked 155. Played, I think that's a hugely successful draft pick at 155.
LaShawn Sims was a successful 5th round pick, and LaShawn Sims was
right. Okay. So Tajay Spears was a 5th round pick. Jonnu Smith was pick 100. I think that's the type of player you're looking at 103. If you get Terrence Ferguson, who's another one of my guys who's just underrated.
I like him.
Totally underrated. This is a guy who led all of college football tight ends in yards after catch. He is big. He's physical. He's athletic. He can do everything. He's played in an offense that is predicated on quick and tempo and passing. I know that Callahan doesn't love the tight end, but like that's a Jonnu Smith type of pick right there.
He's there. You're very excited that he's there. I'm not imagining him being there.
So Dane Cruikshank at 152. I think you're looking for a little bit more than that, but he certainly was a contributing player for.
And he had some moments that were very good. Right. That one year he did some great things against some tight ends.
David Long, pick 188. There's another great example of this.
Very good pick.
Amani Hooker, pick 116.
Terrific pick.
I took in my mock draft with Nick on Thursday. I took Lathan Ransom with pick 120 because there's going to be a lot of good safeties on the board at 120. And if you want a starting potential safety at 120, i.e. Amani Hooker at 116, there's a lot of good ones right there available. Jalen Reed at a Penn State. You got Malachi Moore out of Alabama. Jonas Sanker out of Virginia.
And they not only need a third safety, they need a potential replacement for Amani Hooker next year. His contract is up.
Yeah, no question about that. And I think corner and safety are. I had them taking Quincy Riley and Ransom with the 2 4ths, which I think are. It's not really necessarily going after need. It's just sort of going after philosophy on your roster, which is depth at corner and in safety. But we keep looking. Chig was pick 143 in the 4th round. That's a solid draft pick right there. That's a good draft pick. So, and then of course we know Brownlee. Josh Wiley was a 5th round pick. I don't know if we're calling that hugely successful at 147.
Looking worse and worse.
Yeah. So again, I think everybody kind of gets the point here. So here's sort of how I defined it. If you have above the line success with Cam Ward, I want to solve a position, and I'll call that success. If it's Cam Ward plus the edge position is solved, meaning in some way, shape, or form, you've got maybe the guy at 35 is the starter, and you got a depth piece. Or maybe you trade back and you draft 2, and that solves your edge position, and you feel good about that. Again, this is going to take time to learn the answers to this. But if you get Ward and the edge solved in this draft, that would be successful to me. If you take Ward and get a starting bona fide receiver that can replace Calvin Ridley and be your number 1 in 2 years, that's a successful draft to me. Overhaul of the roster is not really possible, I don't think, with this draft. I don't think you can do that without a pick between 35 and 103. I think you're going to have to figure out a way to add more picks to your draft if you want to truly turn the roster over with one great Washington Commanders type of draft class. So it's hard for me to find. I mean, that would clearly be success. I just don't think that's necessarily possible. I think you need 2 or 3 starting players outside of Cam, or to your point, 3 or 4 contributors who are on the roster for more than a season, that are not on the practice squad, that are on the team for more than a year. So I think there's lots of ways to define success with this, because if you hit with Ward, it gives you a lot of leeway the rest of the way, which of course means that there's a lot of pressure on that pick being evaluated correctly, which, goes without saying.
Yeah, but I would say, if Ward's a home run, if Ward's a franchise quarterback, it doesn't mean that they get a pass for the rest. And like if the rest of the draft is a wash, history will look back and say the Titans had a great draft because they found a franchise quarterback. But if they don't find an edge rusher or a receiver or anything else, they will have really burnt the chance to start to build around that franchise quarterback. And so it won't really be a success. It'll be a success from 30,000 feet, maybe, or I don't know, maybe I'm right backwards. It'll be a success from ground level, but it will not be a success from 30,000 feet.
I find it interesting. The edge conversation for me is so complicated because I'm seeing mocks where Luther Burden is the 35th pick. And if they end up with Cam Ward and Luther Burden with their first 2 picks, I'm okay with anything else that happens. Because I'm like, you know what? If you decide to punt on edge because it's hard to solve after the 35th, 40th, 45th pick, and you don't have any assets in that middle range there, I don't really have a problem with that. I don't love it, but I don't have a problem with it. But because the problem is that anybody who falls to them at 35, James Pierce has a question. Nick Scorton has a question. I know Bo asked about Scorton earlier. Mike Green has a question. Donovan Ozaraku has a question. There are questions about these guys, and asking an edge rusher in the 2nd or 3rd or 4th round to be your starter is asking a lot. It's asking a lot. And so I feel more comfortable with a Emeka Egbuka or Luther Burden or Tyler Warren or Malachi Starks being a bona fide starter, because the point is, You need more than Cam Ward out of the draft. You need at least one or two other starters. And that 35th pick is obviously your best chance to get a bona fide starter. And if like people don't want Tyler Warren, the internet will go nuts if they take Malachi Starks. They will lose their minds if they take Xavier Watts with the 35th pick. But Xavier Watts is another one of those guys who is always around the football for a reason. He doesn't test great. Doesn't have the measurables. The combine didn't love him. He is a great football player. He's all over the place all the time. There's a reason he has his hands on the football as a safety all the time because he's good at it. He's good at the game. And the internet would lose its mind if they do that. But if they get Cam Ward and a bona fide star safety or a bona fide starting receiver, or like that is success for the Tennessee Titans, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, it is. It's a little more patient success because everybody's going to go, they signed Xavier Woods. And, and so now they're 3 deep at safety, and it's less exciting to be 3 deep at safety than it is to fill a place where there's no deep.
Let's do some questions here. QC says, QC's an Iowa fan, by the way. Wasn't Hooker taken in the 3rd round? He was picked 119. I think it's the 4th round. Wasn't he a guy? The Titans didn't even realize that. You have to refresh me on that one in terms of whether or not they had him on their board or not. If Loveland falls, says Eddie, he would love him. There you go.
He's not falling.
I don't think he is either. Would you rather trade one of the 4ths? I guess this is trade back one of the give up a 4th to go up and get a 3rd. Is that what he's talking about?
4th's not worth a 3rd, so that's a hard trade to make.
I guess maybe 2 4ths. If you trade 103 and 120, maybe you can move up and get like 85, maybe. Maybe. You'd have to go get somebody that, again, if you're going to do that, they have to be a starter. They almost have to be a starter at that point if you're going to give up multiple picks. Let's see here. What else we got? I'd get mad if a kicker was drafted. I'm not, actually. If they have an Evan McPherson in the 6th round that they want to take who solves the problem long term, I don't have a problem with that, but I don't think there's that guy in this draft.
Undrafted. Take an undrafted.
Yeah. Let's see here. So solve 2 positions. They're gambling their first on a quarterback. So solve 1 more. Fair. I think that's the right way to look at it. If you can solve 2 positions, including the quarterback, you've had a successful draft.
I mean, I'll argue against that. Like solving edge means getting 2 edges. And solving receiver means probably getting 2 receivers. Well, I'd rather you have 1 good edge and 1 good receiver. I'm not as concerned with the 2nd receiver and the 2nd edge. So yep. I'd rather go 1 and 1 there. And my ideal draft, provided there are good options on the board, is to get the best edge or receiver at 35. And then if you're waiting until 103, get the best guy at the other position, understanding that it depends on the context of what's happened. But
let's see here. Eddie says trading down to 9 and taking Warren would be hilarious. It would also be a phenomenal player on the team. Like, I'm not saying that's the right strategy, but he is a phenomenal player. Like, he's going to be great in the NFL. Let's see here. Jason says McShay says they think, and I don't know about. Have you seen McShay's new haircut? I don't know what he's doing. Said he thinks that there's going to be a big edge run in the first. I agree with that, and it's going to push everyone else down. Good for wide receiver, bad for getting an edge. I tend to agree with that. I also think I think Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck are all not first round. Like, Shedeur might be a first round pick, but I think all those names get pushed down, which adds value to the 35th pick as well for the Tennessee Titans in theory.
So. Well, the problem with that 35th pick is that it's 35th and not 33rd.
Overnight.
So I think the 33rd is the most attractive pick to assure you get your quarterback of choice. That's the team you're calling. Thursday night at the end when the first round's over, or Friday morning.
Yep. Let's see here. Joe says belly of the draft is 25 to 80. I tend to agree with that. It's why in a perfect world I'd love to trade back to 18 and get like 4 extra picks. Like, I just think that would be fantastic. Andrew says Tyler Booker, Jordan James, and Jack Sawyer. I'm not on board with Jack Sawyer. I think he's a little.
I'm not either. He's mostly effort.
And effort
is great, but not premium.
It's great for a 5th round pick, right? Like, that's great for a 5th round pick. I will agree that with Tyler Booker, though, and Tyler Booker falls into a category of interior offensive linemen who were great in college and are never going to get valued in the top 10 or 15 or 20 because they're interior offensive linemen. They're guards for a reason. But Donovan Jackson, for example, is an All-American at Ohio State. That has been a guy who has been a great football player since the second he stepped on campus. They asked him to play tackle, and they won a national championship. And they were great in the playoffs with a guard, Donovan Jackson, at tackle. And so that's a guy that for some reason is not getting the same love as a bunch of the tackles for some obvious reasons and some others that are stupid. He's a guy, him and Tyler Booker are going to be fantastic NFL players, in my opinion. I like guys who are good right away against high-level competition when playing under a lot of pressure and get recognized by their peers as being very good. Those are the players. I like those kinds of players. So Donovan Jackson and Tyler Booker are on my list for sure. Terrence Ferguson is on my list. Seth McLaughlin is on my list. This is a guy who was like an All-American caliber center at Alabama, goes to Ohio State, and is also one of the leaders of the team. There are some injury issues, and maybe that's why he's getting knocked. But why is he a fifth-round player? I don't understand this. He's a very good center. If you're picking at 141 and you want an interior offensive lineman, that's the place to get a guy like that. He's just underrated.
I think we can expect the Titans to steer clear of injury history guys, or to score them down.
We'll get to that in a second. Noah Williams, All-American cornerback for Cal. He's going to be a late pick. He's going to be maybe in the 6th round potentially, but that's a pretty good football player who played against. He's a really good player. He's an All-American Thorpe candidate. He is going to be good. He may not be elite. He may not have elite measurables the way Ravel does or Jade Barron does or some of these other guys, Will Johnson. He is going to be an NFL player. How good, I'm not sure, but he's a really good player. Give me Noah Williams out of Cal, for example, later in the draft. Jay Higgins, linebacker at Iowa. In the right place at the right time all the time. His whole career at Iowa. Just a really good football player. That guy late in the draft, that's how you build good rosters, is with those kind of guys. IQ guys who have played a lot of ball against high-level competition. They're professionals, and they're going to act that way when they get to the NFL. That's another name.
Good list.
Let's see who else. Dylan Sampson, although I don't like putting running backs on this list, but Dylan Sampson is a very good football player, and he's probably going to go up on boards, actually, to be honest with you. Tate Ratledge at Georgia is another one. Interior offensive lineman, going to be pretty good in the NFL. And frankly, reminds me of the Tennessee. He just, to me, speaks Tennessee Titan. I don't know. Somebody said something about getting a receiver. You can't fix receiver. I think this is the whole theory around the trading back at 35. You can fix receiver with the 70th pick. You can. If you like Io Manor like I do, if you like Jaden Knoll like I do, may not be available. If you like Jack Besh like I know you do, like I do, these guys can be a number 2 for Calvin Ridley and become a number 1 potentially down the road. Like those guys can solve the problem at 70. That's the beauty of that position.
Yeah, I love Besh. I don't know if he is going to be a number 1 for you, though. I think he can be maybe a poor man's poor man. A poor man's Puka Nacua. Okay. And Puka Nacua was a poor man's Cooper Kupp, right? And
fifth round pick, right?
And Cooper Kupp was a poor man's I don't know, but
Julian Edelman.
Yeah. I mean, I love Besh. I think he's going to do the right things all the time. He's going to catch a ton of balls and all of that, but he lacks the explosive dynamic that I think you need to be the guy. And that's why, like, if Higgins is there at 35, I would have a really hard time. Yeah. You got to take Higgins first, right?
I don't, but I know why.
No?
I know why you think that. No, I think he's a little. Look, I think Tet McMillan's really good too, but I think he's a little lacking in the explosive agility category, right? Like, you want Devontae Adams, take Elik Iomanor out of Stanford. That is Devontae Adams.
I like him too.
That is what he's going to be. He's going to be Devontae Adams, who can play in the slot, who can play around the red zone, who's got a big catch radius, who's got great hands. He cooked Travis Hunter one-on-one. Go back and watch the tape two years ago. See, Rich says, you can tell Braden is the fall in love with late picks kind of guy. He'd trade the draft for 23rd round picks. Here's the deal, see, Rich. That's not
third round is not late.
That's not yeah, exactly. That's top 100. Here's what I like. I like 2 different types of players, like in the middle in the late draft. I like players like we're talking about, this list of guys who are consistently been very good at the game for a long period of time, generally at a high level. I like those guys. Like, for example, at a lower level, Nick Nash, All-American receiver, very well respected. Everybody said best receiver in the Mountain West. Tough player to cover. That's probably a guy who's going to be better than where he gets drafted. So what I like is players who were very good in college that get overlooked for 1 or 2 measurable issues. And here's the other type of player I really like. The former 5-star recruit who just didn't figure it out yet and gets pushed down boards and is drafted in the 3rd or 4th round, and just for whatever reason it didn't click. Maybe they're too young, maybe the system didn't work, maybe they didn't get developed, maturity, a number of reasons. But those guys end up in the 3rd round a lot of times, and a lot of times they end up being very good NFL players because the pedigree was always there, the talent was always there, they just hadn't clicked it on yet. And there's plenty of those guys. Yeah, MPF would have been one of those guys. That is absolutely correct, Donnie. Good call. He was waiting. He was waiting on that one.
Yeah. Go to Andrew Cooper, who's just off the screen here a little bit at the top. That's one of my
yeah. I know where you're going here. All right, there we go. Scadaboo is an absolute freak, says Andrew, who every team should add to their roster. Hope the Titans do. Go ahead, PK.
Yeah. I'm on the other side of this. I mean, the guy wants contact, and that's an admirable trait in a running back until the contact starts to break him. And I think Cam Scadaboo, as fun as he is to watch, is not a guy you want on your team, because I think, wanting contact like that is going to result in breaking things and the kind of bruises that keep you out of games. And I just think at the next level, the beating that you're asking for is the kind that you don't recover from, and that adds up very quickly.
I'm torn on Cam Scadaboo. I think he does make your team better, but if you're drafting him in the 6th round to be a 3rd stringer running back, that's great. If you draft him in the 4th round to be a backup, not so sure. And if you draft him in the 2nd or 3rd round to be a starter, you're going to get a good couple of years, I think. I think he is a very physical player. Here's an example.
And that's okay. Look, the Titans used to be fine. Like the Vrabel Titans for sure were fine with 3rd rounders being one contract guys. I think this team is not. This team is expecting 3rd rounders, even 4th rounders to come in. And if they pan out, they're expecting them to pan out. And B, they're expecting when they pan out to be guys that they want to sign to 2nd contracts and to have 8-year careers. That has not been the case previously.
Yeah. Let me give you 2 examples here. Those are guys that are in probably be potential 3rd round picks. Jordan Burch out of Oregon, defensive edge rusher, and Alfred Collins, defensive tackle out of Texas. Neither of those guys lived up to their recruiting potential. Both were 5 stars. Jordan Burch was a top 20 player in the country coming out of high school, and so was Alfred Collins, a 5-star recruit coming out of high school for Texas. Took a little bit longer for both of them to develop. Collins really came on strong at the end of last season for Texas, but sort of had kind of a stop-and-start herky-jerky career at Texas and got overshadowed by the 2 guys that were there last year, or 2 years ago, I guess I should say, in Sweat and Murphy. And in this past – yeah, right. And so those are 2 guys that have a ton of pedigree and upside. And Burch is being projected as a mid-3rd round pick. And I guarantee you, if he gets into the right place and applies himself, which is a big question, that's the kind of player that is better than their draft slot. And those guys exist at every position. It's the big-time recruit that didn't quite develop all the way yet. And it's the guy who was a little less of the recruit, but was just a great football player because he didn't test well or didn't run a 40 time well. How many receivers, Paul, do we look at after the fact and we go, I can't believe Amon-Ra St. Brown or Stephon Diggs or all these guys that just didn't run great 40s. And it's like
Jerry Rice and Anquan Bolden both ran in the 4.7. But I look at Xavier Restrepo at 4.85, and I'm scared to death of him. I know he's got quickness, and I know he had great success. And I know there's a Julian Edelman, tough guy, competitive guy. And I'm not looking for the Justin Hunter, Dorial Green, Beckham type of athlete, but I'm looking for more athletic than this. For the Titans specifically, they need to be more athletic than that. And they need to be inside, outside guys, I think. I don't want him.
The Restrepo pick at 120, I could be on board with. I could be on board with Restrepo at 120. I've talked myself into it, but I don't think he's your number 1 solution at that position. If you can get Luther Burden,
2 solution.
If you can get Luther Burden at 35 and then come back and get Restrepo at 120, I think you make Cam Ward's job a lot easier.
I confess to not being a student of the draft nearly to the level you are and a lot of our friends are. But I am certain there are slot receivers out there who bring more than Xavier Restrepo in the fourth.
Okay. I a player and where you feel about the value can change over the course. Like when the conversation around Restrepo was in the second round, I was like, no chance. This seems ridiculous. And now the pendulum has swung a little bit, and now they're talking late fourth, early fifth, and I'm like, I think he is a dependable piece that has a relationship and a very good relationship, very productive relationship with your potential star quarterback. I could be on board with him at pick 120 if he falls. And if he falls, there's obviously a reason, et cetera, et cetera.
Where's Arroyo? Is Arroyo a fourth rounder? If you want to get a guy with a relationship with Cam, I'll take Arroyo.
I don't I don't know if he's got the same future production level, but I've talked to some of the ESPN scouts who I work with, and there's a couple of them that are very high on him being the most athletic tight end in this class. What does that mean? I don't know. We'll see. I think Andrew's probably right that he's probably not available even at 103. Yeah. I don't think Terrence Ferguson's available at 103 either. So we'll see. There's a certain type of tight end. Gunnar Helm is one of them. Arroyo's another one of them. They are split out. Harold Fannon's another one. They are split out. They're not inline guys.
They need an inline guy.
And Jackson Hawes in the sixth round.
I just look at this. Jackson Hawes.
Jackson Hawes is my guy, dude.
Jackson Hawes. Now, I don't think he's doing much catching the football, but you can put him on the field at the line and he can block. And those guys, you can't find those guys.
Jackson Hawes with their first pick in the sixth round is what I mocked on Thursday. It's super smart guy. He went to Yale and then he decided, this is what when he was talking, we talked to him at the combine, and his answer was like, why did you want to go to Georgia Tech? And I love this answer on a nerd level because Georgia Tech's offensive coaching staff is off of the Todd Monken tree, and they are running incredibly interesting pre-snap stuff. They are doing really fun and interesting stuff on their offense. And when Jackson Hawes was asked, well, why did he go to Georgia Tech? He said, I looked at teams, their offensive scheme, and who was running 12 personnel a lot. I love 12 personnel. And he went to Georgia Tech, which is a pro-style offense that they overachieved significantly in the win-loss column, and he likes to block like a you-know-what. Just like, that's a guy I like, man. Give me that kind of guy.
I mean, if they can't, you would ideally like to find an inline guy who can also get downfield for you. But A, they don't have picks to find that guy. B, there aren't a lot of those guys. And so,
how many of those guys exist on planet Earth today? On the whole Earth? Like not 6, 8, 10? Like Brock Bowers isn't that guy. And Brock Bowers is an elite player. But he's not that guy. You
take him and you adjust your offense for him.
Yeah, exactly. Would have been a good piece to have last year. All right. Anyway, anything else from a prediction standpoint that you want to empty the notebook here and say this is what I think is going to happen this week?
Well, I mean, I have a couple. I think Carson Schweissinger from UCLA, I loved at the beginning of this whole process when he was rated as like a fourth rounder. You're talking about some of these. It really, if I'm not mistaken, he had 1 year. Before that, he was a great special teamer who kind of worked his way up. A fantastic player, but now he's rated like the second inside linebacker, and he's going in the second round. I've seen him in the first round. I think it's crazy. I love him. I'm looking forward to watching him play. I can't imagine drafting him in the late first, early second round. I'm anti-inside linebacker, generally speaking.
That is a player that you only have the luxury to take if you move out of one.
Yeah, or if you have zero holes. And I want to give a shout out to James Foster, who writes at my site. He's turned me on to two players in a big way. Za Frazier from Texas San Antonio, who's pushing the boundaries of corner at almost 6'3". He runs a 4.36.
He's moved
is ridiculous.
He's moved way up boards. You could get him in the 6th, 7th at the beginning. Now he's up in the 4th, 5th round. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to watching him play. And I would love it if he was here. And Corey Kiner from Cincinnati is the late running back that I would like to see, and that's another James Foster guy. So those are two guys that I've really have my eyes on. And one that I've found that I think I don't know. I think Dane Brugler has him in the 4th. maybe that's a little high for the project offensive lineman. But Jalen Rivers, the offensive lineman for Miami, there's another Cam Ward connection. The little bit I've watched of him, this guy has real long arms. And he seems to me to be incredibly patient and does not panic. And he just holds guys off initially and buys himself so much early time that it seems to me like if you're looking for a project, and it seems like he projects to guard, a candidate to maybe be Kevin Zeitler's succession.
I also mocked Jalen Rivers to the Titans.
Is that right?
On Thursday. Thanks for listening to the show, PK.
I did not listen to the show. So this is shocking that we're landing on a couple of the same.
No,
guys.
I had Rivers with pick 1. So final prediction here is they're going to take a lineman. I think 141 is the range you take him because you could get Clay Webb or Rivers or Miles Frazier from LSU. A lot of really good players in that range. You can kind of take. You got to be ahead of the run. And if you pick a corner at 103, you're ahead of the run. If you pick a safety at 120, you're ahead of the run. You take a guard at 140.
You're pretending like you know where the runs are.
I know everything.
Based on whose numbers?
I know everything.
Who's telling you when the runs are?
141. Well, because a lot of these guys are graded in the 160s and 180s and 200s.
Yeah, graded by who?
The consensus. I'm just using the consensus.
Well, the consensus doesn't tell you what the consensus is among the 32 people that matter.
The consensus doesn't mean anything on one given player, but it can mean something around a positional group of players that you like at a position. So, like tight end and running back, you can wait till the sixth round to get those players. Because you mentioned Kiner, LaQuinta Allen is who I had them taking in the 6th round, but you also could get Jarquez Hunter. You could also get a number of other players. Woody Marks is going to be available probably late. Like the group of players that could be available at that position that adds a weapon for both Cam Ward and, in case Pollard or Spears something happens, which could be likely, you don't have to go earlier than 178 or 188 or whatever.
I don't like a football player named Woody. Maybe at quarterback or kicker, but nowhere else.
What about a coach? Are you okay with a coach?
Well, sure. I mean, one of the all-time greats is Woody.
That's what I was asking. Okay. All right.
Got to accept that.
Jabari says Quincy Riley. Yes, I've got them taking Quincy Riley in the 4th round. So here's the other thing. Is this a fair way to just maybe wrap up this conversation? We all have Cam going number 1. Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Come to the draft party, please. Buy some tickets and come hang out, support some kids, and have a good time. Eat some great meat, drink some beers, watch some football. It's gonna be a great time. I promise you. Should the Titans just look at 35 and say we will take best available edge or receiver? One of them is going to fall to us, and then stick to the script the rest of the way.
It depends on who that best available. You're being one of those fans that wants a script. They want a pre-script.
No. No. Well, let me. I don't. The reason I asked that is I don't think you can solve. I don't think you can solve edge and receiver with a starting player unless you trade. So what I'm coming around to is that they're just not going to trade, and so they're going to draft a quarterback and then one of the two at 35 to solve that problem, and then they're probably not going to have enough ammunition or enough will to do anything else. In which case, I don't think you should reach for a bunch of players that may not be valuable at 103 or 120 or whatever. Just stick with the plan of like, hey, we got to get a corner. We like having a tight end maybe. Like, well, I don't know what that is, but like stick with filling the draft picks in the back end with those back 6 picks sort of the way you wanted to all along, and don't chase. Don't chase a position that you didn't get because you couldn't trade 35.
So I think I wonder if there's a good scenario, like we talked a little bit earlier about somebody predicting, McShay predicting that there would be a run on edges. So if there's a run on edges in the late 1st, that packs up receivers coming around to 35. If that packs up receivers coming around to 35, I think the thing to root for if you're a Titans fan is that the Titans like 3 receivers equally. And you get to 35 and all 3 of those receivers are on the board. And they see teams that have some needs beyond receiver behind them, and they can move back comfortably 7 spots. And if they can move back comfortably 7 spots and be assured of getting one of their receivers, then they're in prime position. You can get a good other pick, and you can get one of your 3 receivers, then you're in business, right? So that's one scenario where at 35, you'd feel pretty good about trading back 7 spots. So that's the kind of thing I would root for, right?
Yeah, I could see that. I also understand that if Emeka Ibuka is available, you just take him.
Yeah.
Like I think he's if he or Burden are there, I have come around on don't try to solve edge if you can absolutely solve your receiver with your quarterback problem with your first 2 picks. I've come around on that. Either way you trade back, you have to be willing and prepared to go a little early on both of your picks. If you trade back to 45, hypothetically, like you're saying, 7 to 10 picks, you have to be willing to go early on the next wave of edge or receiver players if that's what happened. You have to be prepared. And there's only a handful of edge guys that I would go early on. JTT is one of them, for example. I don't love Landon Jackson.
I like JTT. I like JTT. He's one of my favorites.
I do too. But if he's like in the mid 50s, but you trade back to 45, well, you got to take him there. Yeah. Because if you get a pick in the 60s, that's where you're going to get your receiver. Because you're not going to get your edge in the 60s, I don't think. I think you got to get him first. But
I think people probably should come to terms. This is what I'm doing anyway. I think a trade out of 35 is less likely.
That's what I'm doing.
I'm putting stick and pick at 75, 78%. Right?
I agree.
Because the odds are you're going to be there and there's going to be somebody you really like. And it's going to be hard to talk yourself out of taking somebody you really like. You need good players. And you could say we go back and maybe we get 2 players we like a lot, but this guy we really love and he is a big value here. And we're just going to have to suck it up and not have a third.
Yes, I agree. Joe says he likes Swinson. I also like him as well. He's another one I would go early on if you trade back, but again, not at 35. You don't take JTT at 35 and Swinson at 35 unless you get a receiver in the deal as well in the 60s or 70s. So again, if someone falls out of the first round at 35, I'm with you. I'm coming around on sticking and picking with someone that was projected in the top 30, who's going to fall to you at one of your 2 positions of desperate need, and that you're going to probably take that player. It probably means if it's a receiver, I think you have to be okay with, and this goes to our wrapping up our conversation around defining success. If they get Cam Ward and Luther Burden and then solve safety and tight end and running back, sure, edge is a major problem next year, but I'm okay with punting on edge, not chasing it, and solving a lot of other problems. I think that's sort of the way I'm looking at that. So,
and I will say this. I will say this. I mean, I would really, it would kill me for them to punt at edge. But for how often they have punted at receiver, intentionally and unintentionally, I mean, if you had to choose one to punt at,
I don't
mean,
like
you can't. That's no
either.
choice. Like my dad used to say when I presented him with these things, and he would say, "That's no choice," and that is no choice. I mean, to not be able to rush the passer next year would just, devastate their chances. But you can't not have wide receivers.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could easily flip that around and say you can't not have pass rushers. Well, so that's why they're in this catch-22. Their roster sucks.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think of, and maybe it's not relevant. Maybe this is why it should be the best available at the positions of need, right? Which to me is best available.
Pretty much because of the roster.
Right, is that Calvin Ridley is still you have a number 1 right now today at receiver. You do not have a number 1 at edge. I think that's the difference.
That is a major difference. Though I'm a little reluctant to call Calvin Ridley a 1 in the context of a league. 1s in the context of a league don't run 4 yards on a 3rd and 7, imagining a player to be there who's not there.
The field is still the same width. Last time I checked, hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. Dimensions haven't changed.
And I like Calvin Ridley. And Calvin Ridley got better. He just has moments, and those moments I don't think are going away. He's far enough along in his career that I think we know what Calvin Ridley is. Yeah. And he's a player you want on the Tennessee Titans football team.
Yeah,
he's just a player that needs somebody better than him with him.
I think you want 2 low top number guys. 1s. Yeah. 2 low number 1s, and Ridley and Ibuka, Ridley and Burden are two solid number 1s that are not great, but they're upper tier 2s or lower tier 1s. And I think
the other guy has potential to eclipse.
Yes. I think Luther Burden could be a number 1 in this league, and I would take him as such. I would take Ibuka as well as 2 guys that are going
to chance to eclipse.
They would take over for Ridley as a number 1. I totally agree with that. I don't think you get an edge there that's a number one edge. I just don't. So I'm on board with sticking and taking a receiver that falls to you if that happens.
So, in conclusion, next year's number one pick, an edge.
Edge. That's exactly right. We didn't get a chance to talk about your article, but make sure you go to paulkuharsky.com to go check out that article. Some durability indicators that really turned on some other NFL coaches in the league. So that's something that, to me, that says at least the Titans are thinking about stuff in a modern way. So quickly give everybody a quick synopsis, tease it out so they can go to your website and pay for good journalism.
Yeah, something that Mike Borgonzi mentioned very casually when I talked to him last about a metric that the Titans are factoring into their draft stuff that goes beyond height, weight, speed, stuff you get at the combine. And then I took it around to some other coaches and Dave Canales and particularly Gannon from Arizona. And I know they're not the two best coaches in the league, but they both lit up at this. And Andy Reid confirmed that it's something that the Chiefs really use. And something, I searched around. I haven't seen much written about this at all. Check it out at paulkuharsky.com.
Awesome. There you go. Tickets are available. Just a few more left for Thursday night and a few for Saturday night as well. You're going to get a bourbon tasting on as curated by Sinkers Beverages on Saturday night, and you're going to get an off-the-record private Q&A with Kuharsky and Suss and Cavendish and me and Stoney and JT and whoever else decides to show up. It's going to be a lot of fun. And, of course, all you can eat, all you can drink from Sinkers and from Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, catered by our great sponsors. Right there in Wedgwood, Houston at the Track 1 building, very accessible to all interstates, very accessible to all the neighborhoods around town. I've seen so many of you guys show up each of the last 2 years. Can't wait to see you guys again. It's always a great hang. So looking forward to it on Thursday night, and then PK is going to be there on Saturday.
I'm looking forward to it.
Buy some tickies and come hang out with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. Anything else? Any final predictions? Any final predictions?
I'm not much of a predictor. Game scores, draft picks.
Have fun.
Let it happen and tell you what it seems to me.
Yep. Let's have some fun. That's what matters. Otherwise, thanks to all of you guys for being in the comments today. You guys were great. Going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be great. And you know what? Going to eat a lot of smoked meats and drink some beverages and watch the Titans tie their entire franchise future to one player who went to Incarnate Word. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Look forward to seeing all of you there. Thanks.
Awesome. Check out pk.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back next time. Nick, by the way, Nick Suss and I will be back Wednesday and Friday this week. So lots of extra content for you. Check out the Paul Kuharsky podcast as well.
See ya.
All right. All right, everybody. Talk to you later. Thanks for listening.